This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to answer the question, why not just cancel all the debt? And this video is a follow-up to the last few videos. Yesterday we talked about the EU forming a registry for all assets and preparing to steal people's stuff. And as part of that, I linked to this tweet that talks about the very high debt levels, unfunded pension entitlements as a percentage of GDP, 300 to 500% for all of these different countries in Europe. I also talked about this in the context of the US elections and why whomever we elect is going to have a lot of problems, whether it's Trump or Harris or RFK, because of this 35 trillion in US federal debt plus 217 trillion in future unfunded liabilities. Here's the national debt, that 35 trillion. So the question came up in the comment section, why not just cancel all the debt? That's what I'm going to talk about today, but we first have to make sure everyone's on the same page. U.S. public debt, also known as government debt, is issued by the U.S. Treasury. That's why these are called U.S. Treasuries. The U.S. government borrows money by issuing this debt. Basically, you give them cash, which the U.S. government can then use for bombs and bribes. And then the U.S. Treasury gives you in exchange a piece of paper or a digital piece of paper that shows up in your brokerage account with the promise to pay, in the case of T-notes and T-bonds, semi-annual interest payments, and then repay the original amount, what's called the principal, to you when the bond matures. So you have different kinds of U.S. Treasuries that are sorted based on their maturity dates. Treasury bills, T-bills, mature in 1 year or less from the issuance date. They're issued at a discount, like a zero coupon bond, and they don't pay any interest, but you do make money because you purchase them at a discount and then they mature at par. Treasury notes, also known as T-notes, they mature in 2 to 10 years from the issuance date. And then Treasury bonds, T-bonds, also known as long bonds, they mature in usually 20-year, they have 20-year maturities or 30-year maturities. We can see here how much in each category the U.S. owes. We have about 6 trillion in T-bills, about 14 trillion in Treasury notes, and then about 4.5 trillion in T-bonds. There's some intragovernmental holdings, but if you take a look at the totals here, they're pretty much the same. So why not just cancel all this debt? Wouldn't that solve the U.S. government's debt problem? The thing is, on the government's balance sheet, that debt is a liability. It's something that the U.S. government owes to someone else. But on the bond owner's balance sheet, that debt is an asset. It's something that someone owns. So if my elderly father, for example, owns some T-bills, which is not a very good investment, but nevertheless, it's a pretty safe place to park money if you're very old and don't want a stock bear market to ruin your retirement. If my father owns some T-bills, that government debt is an asset for him. It's a liability for the U.S. government, but it's an asset for him, and he holds it in his brokerage account, for example. So what happens if you cancel all the U.S. government debt? Then those T-bills that my father owns are now worthless. Now he can't buy groceries, he can't pay for utilities and medical care, he can't fill up his car with gas, and he cannot pay his property taxes, so that has implications for the local government as well and the local schools. Now multiply this by every American who holds U.S. Treasuries, and you see that canceling U.S. government debt would instantly impoverish millions of Americans, most of whom are retired. If you're enjoying this video so far, I just ask you to help to support the channel. There are a number of different ways you can do it. You can subscribe, you can leave a like for this video, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video. You can share this video with a friend or family member, and then if you'd like to help out in monetary ways, you can leave a super thanks, you can leave a tip, you can also join the channel by clicking the join button, and for $2 or $4 a month you get various perks. So I'd encourage you to check those out. Those really help me with the YouTube algorithm, which is why I push them so much. Now, the U.S. government's debt is always someone else's asset. It may be sitting inside a pension fund, for example, for some other person's retirement. It may be sitting on the balance sheet of an insurance company that will need the money to pay out future claims. It may be sitting on the balance sheet of another country. If we take a look at the tick data, we can see all the holdings of U.S. Treasuries by different countries and their central banks. So if you cancel U.S. debt, you just stole 1.1 trillion from Japan. That's how much they have right here. This is in millions, essentially. You stole 1.1 trillion from Japan, and you also stole 768 billion from China, which is not an ally like Japan is. So that pretty much covers the 35 trillion in public debt that's already on the U.S. government's balance sheet, what if we take a look at the U.S. unfunded liabilities? These are future promises that will be needed to be paid out and will eventually convert into debt and be held on the U.S. government's balance sheet. It's $27 trillion in Social Security liabilities and then $41 trillion in Medicare. Those are the really big ones. We have Medicaid as well, and we have other unfunded liabilities. The total, approximately $217 trillion, which is an absolutely enormous amount of money. Now, what about canceling that $217 trillion in future liabilities? Well, again, you could theoretically do it, but you'd be impoverishing the elderly while breaking promises to those who paid into Social Security and Medicare over their working lifetimes. I'm not going to discuss here how those promises will obviously be broken either explicitly or through inflation to Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z, because we're really talking about the present, which mostly includes just boomer retirement. Now, defunding these entitlements is a political third rail, as you can imagine. No politician is willing to touch it today. If politicians got together and decided to defund Social Security and Medicare, they'd be immediately kicked out by voters and replaced by people who would bring back those same entitlements. That's why the most likely way out of this mess is very high inflation in the US, the EU, and elsewhere. These entitlements will be paid out in full, the total nominal amount. The U.S. also will not explicitly default on that $35 trillion of public debt. Everyone will get paid out as promised, but with U.S. dollars that have much, much less purchasing power. So, for example, if you put $50,000 into a 30-year Treasury bond today, that $50,000 buys you the average new U.S. car. That's its purchasing power. In 30 years from now, when that bond matures and you get your principal back, you get your $50,000 back, you'll be really, really lucky, I think, if that $50,000 buys you an entry-level mountain bike. This is what inflation does. This is what fiat currency debasement looks like. And that's why Treasuries make sense as an investment for people in their last few years of life, but they're a terrible, terrible investment to hold for 2, 3, 5 to 30 years. You're also helping to finance, obviously, the world's largest terrorist organization, the U.S. government, by lending money to it. What's the conclusion here? Global debt loads and U.S. debt loads in particular, because it's a world reserve currency, it has a much bigger impact. These guarantee a coming massive devaluation of fiat currencies, including the U.S. dollar. You cannot cancel this debt for reasons we've seen in this video. Instead, what's going to happen, central banks everywhere will need to print new money to buy up this debt. Printing up new money guarantees fiat money loss of purchasing power, as we discussed. Your $50,000 going from buying a new car to buying a bicycle if you're lucky. This is one reason it's very, very important to get some Bitcoin. That's why this whole channel is devoted to Bitcoin. Please keep only as much money in fiat, in US dollars, in euros, in Canadian dollars, in British pounds, in Australian dollars. Keep only as much money in fiat as you are willing to lose. US dollars and all other fiat currencies are melting ice cubes. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.